Hi class, welcome to CIS-17A online here at Norco College. This class is Programming Concepts and Methodology 2 using C++. So I hope everyone's excited to get started. Just a reminder, this class does assume that you have completed a prerequisite, an introductory course to C++, that is CIS-5 or CSC-5 or some sort of equivalent. So this will kind of be an extension of this introductory class. So you'll be learning more different concepts of object-oriented programming in C++ here in this course. So I just wanted to go over a few things of what's expected for this first week. So initially, you should definitely look over the syllabus. So this homepage will be a lot of information regarding the class, the textbook, etc. I recommend that you read through this syllabus. This is sort of contains most of the information here on the Canvas homepage, but you can actually download the PDF version here, which contains the full syllabus and schedule and all of that. So I highly recommend that you read through that. Additionally, I recommend that you an announcement. So I'll be sending out regular announcements. I recommend that you set up email notifications when announcements are posted, and you can do this by going to Account and then Notifications and just turning on email notifications for announcements. And if you would like to do that for grades or assignments posted or anything else, that is fine as well. So in this first week, we'll be doing mostly review of what you should have covered in a previous C++ class. So let's actually look at the first module. So you'll notice that every week the modules will look something like this. So here, this is module 1. You can access it by clicking on modules in this left navigation panel. So you'll kind of have each of these different steps that you'll need to complete. You should definitely click on each and read through each. Definitely read through the assigned reading for this week. There's PowerPoint slides. And this will be instructions on setting up your C++ IDE. So make sure you have that properly set up depending on whether you're using Windows, Mac OS, or a Linux operating system. So these are instructions on setting up that IDE. You're welcome to use any IDE that you wish, as long as you're submitting the correct type of file. So you just want to make sure that you can run your program properly and that you submit the correct file types, .h, .cpp, etc. So that's the goal. You're allowed to use any IDE you wish, just make sure you submit the correct files. But this link will give you some suggestions on which IDEs you can use. I highly recommend Microsoft Visual Studio 2015 if you're using Windows. I recommend that you always try to do as much additional practice as possible. In order to get really good at programming, you need to practice. That's really the best way. You can read, you can study, but the best way to get really good and to really grasp the concepts is to actually code. Get your hands dirty and start coding. So I recommend that you do as much additional practice as possible. And there's discussions that will be available. So if you click on discussions, there will be a coding sort of a collaboration discussion post, which you can post questions when you're doing additional practice. If you get stuck, you can post questions there and allow your peers, your classmates to respond or me to respond as well. But I definitely recommend to do as much additional practice as possible. So in this first week, you'll have to do this discussion post. So I recommend that you all do this as soon as possible. You're required to do this discussion post. It's basically an introduction and give your experience. So this just kind of create a positive learning environment. Just get to know your classmates and introduce yourself. So definitely do this as soon as possible. And then you also have your first quiz that will be due on the 17th. So this quiz will be mostly multiple choice, fill in the blank type questions, and it will be timed. So make sure that you allocate the necessary amount of time to complete the quiz, and you complete that as soon as possible by the deadline. And I highly recommend that you read the chapters required for the quiz prior to taking the quiz, because it is timed. So you don't have much time, so make sure that you read and study and understand the material prior to starting the quiz. And same with the lab. So the lab, make sure you review the material before starting the lab. So you'll have your first lab this week. This lab should be mostly review. So what you'll be doing will be mostly review what you've learned in your previous introductory class to C++. Okay, so here again is a summary of what you'll be covering in this module. Again, these are sort of the things you should look through. So this will be mostly an introduction and review to C++. So you should be seeing things that you've seen before. So one of the key things is make sure that you again have access to your C++ IDE compiler, whether that's Microsoft Visual Studio for Windows, Xcode for Mac OS, or GNU C++ compiler for Linux. So it all depends on which operating system you're using. And again, these are recommended. You can use any IDE that you wish. Also for the lab, I recommend that you look through this lab assignment grading rubric. Make sure you read through that closely, as this is what's going to be used for grading your lab assignments. One key component of this is make sure that you include the header at the top of each file that you submit. So this header should include your name, the file name, the date that it was created, the author, and the description. And all this is laid out inside of this rubric. Additionally, you will have to complete the lab, the quiz, and the discussion post as previously mentioned. And so in this module, you'll be reading chapters 1 through 3. And here are some additional resources that you can use as well. And as always, you can reach out to me for specific questions. So this is the discussion post. Again, this is the required discussion that's for this week. Your posting of just giving you an introduction of yourself and your experience and a little bit about yourself. But there's these two pinned discussions here. So this is general questions and coding collaboration. So you want to make sure that you use these for if you have any sort of questions about the concepts in the course, or a question about the lab, or whatever it may be, the quiz, or any question about the class. I recommend that you post that here in the general questions, as posting it here will allow your classmates to see the question and the responses and help them as well, because I'm sure that the questions you have, others will have as well. There's also this coding collaboration discussion topic. This is more for coding specific questions. So if you're doing additional practice, I recommend using this. If you get stuck or you have a question about writing code, or you're getting an error, you're not sure why, when you're doing this additional practice, post it here. However, do not post your code that pertains to your lab assignment. Okay, so don't post your code here, because then others will be able to see your code and how you did it. So make sure you don't post any lab code here. You can ask lab questions, but don't post any lab code here. And if you do have any questions regarding your lab code, you can email that directly to me instead, and I can help you debug your code, or push you in the right direction. So this is the discussion posts. So here's the lab assignment grading rubric. So this will be used for grading all of your labs. So there's 4 key pieces. The first is program specification and correctness. So this is 50%. So this is, just is your code executing what's expected? You're given a task, and is your code doing what's correctly what the task is expecting you to do? Then readability. So this is more, are you using the correct indentation, white space, spacing, those type of things. So this is very important to make sure your code is readable. So make sure you're consistent with indentation and white space, putting code in that is similar in blocks and things like this. So make sure you read through what it pertains to readability. Then you have documentation. So documentation is very important. So this includes your commenting and your header. So commenting is extremely important. So you make sure you comment throughout all of your code, comment variables using inline comments, and just make sure you comment, functions, and just make sure you comment throughout your code, explaining what each piece of your code is doing. Okay, and finally, you want to make sure you follow the assignment specifications. So this, involves make sure you're naming the zip file correctly, those type of things, to make sure that you're doing what was asked in the assignment. So specifically regarding the header, you can see here you're expected again to have the name of the file, the author, name of which is you, the date created, and the description of what the code is doing. So make sure you include this within comments at the top of every single file that you submit. Okay, this is very important, so make sure you do that on every single file. So definitely read through this document because this will be used for grading your lab assignment. So make sure that you have addressed each of these critical elements. Okay, so this is your lab assignment 1. Again, we make sure that you look through the lab assignment grading rubric prior to completing this lab. Make sure you include a header, comments, and make sure you address readability in all of your code. So you'll have these different tasks, so 3 different tasks, tasks 1 through 3. This will kind of give you, allow you to practice and exactly what you're learning in chapters 1 through 3 of the textbook. So the first part is basically just to demonstrate that you have a working IDE, working environment. So make sure you've set up Microsoft Visual Studio, Xcode, GNU, C++ compiler, whatever it may be depending on your operating system. And make sure you just save a screenshot of your hello world executing properly. And then task 2, you'll be doing basically just working with inputs and outputs and operators. And then task 3 is more just working with kind of refreshing memory with classes and objects, member functions, and strings. Okay, so make sure you complete this properly. And finally, you want to make sure within task 3, you also make this UML diagram. So make sure you look over this unified modeling language. It's talked about in your book. And you're allowed to use any editor of your choice, whether it may be PowerPoint, Paint, or even there's free UML diagram creator tools that you may wish to use as well. So the point is that you want to make sure that you use the proper UML formatting when making the UML diagram for the class here, for the soccer player class. Okay, so that is it. So also finally, you want to make sure that you submit every single file properly. So you follow these submission instructions. One key thing is make sure that you name your zip file correctly. Remember, it should be lab1 underscore your last name underscore your first name. So this is an example of what it would be for me. So make sure you name your file correctly and make sure you save it as either .zip or .tar file and submit that .zip file that will contain all of your files for this lab. And this is just shows the allocation of how things will be graded. So it'll be 20% for task 1, 30% for task 2, and then 50% for task 3. And each of these tasks will be graded according to the lab assignment grading rubric. Okay, so that's everything for this week 1. Make sure again, just look through the Canvas portal. Make sure you have you're familiar with everything going on here in the left navigation panel, discussions, assignments, announcements. Make sure you set up the email notifications. Look through the lab grading rubric. Look through the syllabus. And just look through everything in the site and just make sure everything makes sense. And if you have any questions, remember you can reach out to me directly via email. My email is here on the syllabus, the homepage, or you can send your question through the discussion post. So you can post on the general question discussion post, and I can answer that question there, and then that way it can be seen by everyone else in the class and help them out as well. Okay, and I'll be posting these videos regularly throughout the semester as well to accompany what will be posted in the different modules. Okay, so glad everyone's in the class. I hope everyone's excited to learn about C++, object-oriented programming, and move on to this second part of C++. Okay, thanks, and again, reach out if you have any questions.